When I first moved to California 35 years ago, it was really the cooking of Provence that had captured people's imagination here in California. And I loved the flavors, but already there was something familiar about it because I knew French food, and this was just kind of an extension of French food. A lot of the techniques look the same. But there's one big difference, and that is the climate begins to change as you move to the south of France, and at some point, the olive tree begins to thrive, and suddenly you have olives, you have olive oil, and the south of France really feels like the Mediterranean France. A very different style of cooking because a very different style of cooking oil, cooking fat. So here they are in Paris with cream and butter, but you come to the south of France and olive oil is king, and they make a very soft, almost buttery style of olive oil, which is really no surprise. And they do it just by allowing the olives to ripen even a little bit further than you might expect before they crush it into olive oil. So olives, I would say, are one of the foundational ingredients in Provençal cooking around the Mediterranean, but really it sets Provence aside from the rest of France. I'm going to make two dishes here. One of them, sort of close cousin to ratatouille, a vegetable melange that includes squash and eggplant and tomatoes. And then I'm also going to make a dip, tapenade, which features olives, of all things. So let's get things started. I want to create a little bit of a vegetable jam. I want some vegetables cooked until they're nice and tender. So I've got some sliced onions here already in the pan. They've been cooking for a while. And to that, I'm going to add peppers, and I'm going to add fennel. And if you're not familiar with fennel, I have a bulb of fennel right here. Basically what I did is I cut the tops off of the fennel, and then I sliced this. And it has a wonderful anise flavor, but the texture of celery. So kind of an interesting vegetable to enjoy, interesting spin on flavor. And that sort of licoricey, anisey flavor sort of speaks to another ingredient that makes its way around Provence, and that is Pernod or absinthe, sort of anise-flavored aperitif wines. Anyhow, we're going to cook this until it's nice and soft. I'm going to season it with a little bit of salt here and likewise some pepper, and then let it cook happily all by itself over a low heat so it does not brown. While this is cooking, I'm going to come over here and make the tapenade. Now, tapenade is basically an olive paste, but the word tapenade references capers. So I've got olives, and I'm going to flavor that olive puree with capers, also anchovies, so we're referencing the Mediterranean Sea. I'm going to brighten it up with a little bit of mustard and lemon juice, and then finally, sometimes you'll see recipes that include a spirit. This is a little bit of brandy, and what it does is it makes it, it preserves it a little bit, but more than that, brandy and alcohol is volatile, so the aromatics seem somehow more aromatic, more compelling, more interesting. And while you could make it in a mortar and pestle, I think the food processor will make quick work of it. So here we go. In goes black olives, and I've got two different kinds of black olives here. I've got some oil-cured olives, which have a deeper, almost tarry flavor with some bitterness. And I like them very much. But because it's so intense, I've also added some Kalamata olives here. In the south of France, they have Niçoise olives, which are very small, and they would be appropriate as well. In addition, I'm going to put some anchovy fillet. And what this will provide is a savory flavor. So we're creating a savory flavor by adding those anchovies. I'm going to add capers, and these are at once salty and a little vegetal. And then let's put a dollop of mustard in here. So we're going to enrich this with olive oil as well. But make sure that you get this puree smooth before you begin to add olive oil. So this puree is smooth. And now we can begin, now that it's smooth, we can begin to add the liquid ingredients. If you add liquid too soon, it gets loose in the food processor and it just pushes the chunks of olive and anchovy aside rather than actually cutting them up into smaller pieces. So I'm going to enrich this with olive oil. I'm going to add a little bit of spirits, some brandy to make it more aromatic, and then we'll taste it and see just how much lemon juice we think it needs. All right. Let me scrape this down one more time. You want a sauce that is soft but will hold its shape on a spoon. So I think we're just about there. It's important, I think, to taste this. And it's probably no surprise that there's no need to add salt because there's plenty of salt in capers, likewise in olives. I'd like a little pepper in there. And just a little splash of acidity, but it doesn't take much. All right, so this is done. And let me show you exactly how tapenade looks. This is a full-flavored condiment that will last for a long time in your refrigerator. So I've made a big batch, but you can use it on a lot of different things. Sometimes you'll see versions of tapenade that are actually stretched a little bit. Some people take and open a can of oil-packed tuna, for instance, and add it to the tapenade and stretch it that way. Others put lentils in here to stretch it a little bit if they don't like the flavor so intense. And a favorite version of mine is just to take an eggplant and roast it over an open flame until it collapses, and then take the pulp and add it to tapenade. All three of those things sort of make it a milder condiment. So if you don't like it so intense, you can do exactly that. Let me show you here what you might consider doing with tapenade. I've got some toasts here, and at its most simple, you might take a little tapenade and spread it on a toast and call it a day, or offer up some breadsticks that could be dipped in there. If you like it a little bit more complex, a little tapenade here, and then maybe a piece of tuna and a little sprinkling of parsley. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll take my favorite recipe for deviled eggs, and after the filling has been piped into the egg white, I'll put a little dollop of tapenade right on top, and it's very attractive, but it tastes great. So let me make just one or two more toasts. This is bread that's been brushed with olive oil and toasted. So, along with a glass of wine, this is a great, simple way to begin a Provençal meal. So let's carry on with this vegetable tian. I have this wonderful onion, fennel, and red pepper jam that's wilted down to almost nothing. I'm going to make sure it's seasoned with salt and pepper. And then this will be the foundation of our tian. So in it goes. This is an oven-proof dish. Make sure you have something that can withstand the rigors of the oven. And let's create a nice little bed of vegetables. All right, I'm going to set this aside to free up my board. And the vegetables that we're going to put in there are eggplant. And what I want to do is cut these eggplant about 1/4 inch thick. Some people use a food processor to make this go quicker, but this seems like it goes pretty fast. And I'm going to take all of those and put them right into a big bowl. And then I'm going to cut zucchini the same way into 1/4 inch slices. And last, some tomatoes. Out comes the core. And thin slices. These vegetables I would like to season with salt and pepper and dress with olive oil and some vinegar. This is red wine vinegar. I'm going to put on some thyme, sprinkle on thyme, sprinkle on parsley, and I like to add basil, but I'm going to cut the basil up into ribbons just so it doesn't darken too much. And we'll toss that all together. You want to make sure that everything is nicely coated and properly seasoned. And here's where the fun begins. I want you to take and lay these things in here, but alternate the colors of the vegetables. So begin with tomato, then eggplant, and then zucchini, and move on just that way, keeping your eye on the colors of these vegetables as you go. And to fit them all into a small dish like this, I may have to tilt them up. But this really should be decorative. This is a great thing to do with kids. They absolutely have a ball putting this stuff in here. And then down the middle. And I think I've put in just about as much as I can put in. I'm going to take these vegetables, now that they're all gathered together, and I'm going to bake them in the oven at about 400 degrees. It'll take about 35 minutes, and the tomatoes will begin to give up their moisture and they'll start to stew, and then the zucchini will become tender. And the one vegetable I want you to really pay attention to is the eggplant. Make sure the eggplant gets cooked all the way through, because when it's not cooked properly, it tastes a little bit unpleasant. I'm going to drizzle on just a little bit more olive oil. And we'll put it into the oven. In the last, let's say, 5 to 10 minutes of cooking, I oftentimes will take some cheese, Parmesan cheese, and sprinkle it on here and then return it to the oven until everything's done. So let's take this over to the oven. And you can see here, by the time it's baked, the vegetables begin to collapse a little bit, but the colors and the striated arrangement of the vegetables remains, and it's really a very, very attractive dish. Tastes great at room temperature, tastes great tomorrow, overnight as a leftover, but I would take this to the table, and this is sort of a quintessential Provençal dish. All of these vegetables are part of the Provençal tradition. I just had a thought, and I'll share it with you before we leave. If I had, in addition to the onion jam with fennel and peppers on the bottom, put a tablespoon of tapenade into this, it would be a very different dish, but no less delicious. You know, in the Mediterranean, it never ceases to amaze me how resourceful people are. For instance, this is a weed that grows by the roadside, and yet someone had the vision to recognize this as delicious food and learned how to cook it so that it was actually edible. This is an artichoke. I'm sure you know artichokes already. Here we pay a premium for them, but in the Mediterranean, as I said, they grow wild. Couple of things about artichokes. This is an unopened blossom. So you want to buy an artichoke that's tightly closed like this. There are some that have spines at the end of the leaves, like this one, so be careful you don't spear yourself, and others that are spineless. And then finally, the other thing I would say is it's not uncommon that you buy these early in the year and you'll see that they've been exposed to frost and they'll be a little bit darkened like this on the outside, which is actually preferable. They actually taste a little bit better when they've been kissed by frost, if you will. Anyhow, we're going to make a dish that they make in Provence called artichokes baragoule. And artichokes baragoule are nothing more than artichokes that are braised in olive oil and white wine. So let's get started. Over here, I have a little bit of salted pork, pancetta actually, that's been cooking, rendering its fat. And in that same pan, I want to put some onions and begin cooking those. I'm going to also add some fennel. This is sliced fennel. And celery. And we'll just let that wilt a little bit over a very low heat. So how do you deal with an artichoke? Let me show you right now. First thing, you want to have a bowl of acidulated water close by. So fill a bowl with water and take either a little bit of vinegar, or I like to use lemon, and just squeeze that lemon juice in there. And what that will do is it will prevent the oxidation of this artichoke. Artichokes love to turn brown when they're exposed to oxygen. So this will prevent that. The next thing I would have you do is pull away some of the coarser green, dark green leaves from the base. Just pull those away and you'll see that with the dark green woody leaves gone, that underneath is a paler green leaf. Just like that. These can be discarded. And then with a sharp knife, I want to cut the top half of the artichoke off. That's not the part that I want. And I'll set that aside. Now, this will begin to oxidize very, very quickly, and so it's not a bad idea to just dip it into this acidulated water as you work. Now, with a sharp paring knife, what I want you to do is pare away the dark green leaves from the outside. So here's what it looks like. We just turn this around, just keep going around and around and around and around, and already you can see the dark green leaves are gone. Except not down here. And so with the same sharp knife, we're going to pare away the underside, and we're going to be left with an artichoke heart. The stem is also edible, but we need to get the dark green fibrous portion off, so I usually come from the bottom, and I peel that away too. It's pretty easy to see where the fibers end and the soft part of the stem begin. So all the dark green now has been peeled away. Again, I'm going to put it into acidulated water and make sure that it doesn't oxidize. And then I'm going to cut this into quarters from bottom to top. And this gives you a sense of it being a blossom that has not yet opened. You see the purple of the inside, but you also see what gives an artichoke its name. This is the choke right here. This is a very feathery growth that if you leave it in, oftentimes catches in your throat and will choke you. So what I want you to do is take your paring knife and I want you to cut that out. And usually all the purple leaves come out as well. And that then is an artichoke heart, or more accurately, a quarter of an artichoke heart. And here's the last. Now, I'm leaving these here on the cutting board so that you can see them, but if you're not careful, what you're going to experience is enzymatic browning, and you can see it beginning to happen right here. So I'll scrape this clean, and then we'll put it right into the acidulated water, and that will keep it from browning. And I'm going to add them to this pan. I'm going to add the carrots that I have sliced up. And we're going to braise this in white wine, and that'll provide a little bit of acid. And we're going to braise it in olive oil, which will provide richness. And don't be shy with the olive oil. And then we're going to introduce a little bit of water, but not until the wine has a chance to reduce. I have here something that the French call a bouquet garni, or a garnish bouquet. This is thyme stems and a bay leaf and parsley stems, all wrapped in a leek leaf and tied up into a nice bundle. And I can add that in there, and when this preparation is done, it's easy for me to take it out. And then I've got a couple of cloves of garlic, and I'm going to make it easy for the flavor of this garlic to get into this preparation simply by cracking the cloves of garlic. Once these artichokes begin to cook, the enzymes that cause them to brown are destroyed. At about 140 degrees, all these enzymes are destroyed. So if you can keep them white until they begin to cook, so much the better. All right, now that the wine has reduced a little bit, I'm going to add just enough water so that I'm confident that I can nestle these artichokes in here and they will cook. I don't want to add so much water that the braising liquid loses its savory flavor. And it should be seasoned. And I'll put the lid on, and we'll let those cook for about 25 or 30 minutes. You'll know they're done when you can take the tip of a knife and pierce the heart of the artichoke, and the knife will go in easily, but it will also come out easily. All right, so those can cook very happily by themselves. I want to talk about an herb preparation. Provence is famous for its herbs. They grow on the hillsides everywhere, and they celebrate them in the cooking of Provence. There's a preparation called herbes de Provence, or Provençal herbs, that I have a batch of here, and I'll just share with you very, very briefly what's in it. A lot of wild thyme or thyme that grows on the hillsides in Provence. And then right next to that, I've got some marjoram. And then there's bay leaf. Now here's an interesting one. This is lavender. And it's not the lavender that lives in your grandmother's underwear drawer. This is the actual herb that has not been doused with perfume. And you use the buds on the top. You can buy this in specialty groceries. I've got here some rosemary, a little bit of savory tucked in between, and then orange peel, cloves, and nutmeg. And of these herbs, I have equal parts of all these and then about 1/8 that much of cloves and nutmeg, which tend to be a little bit stronger. Here is the mixture all gathered together. Now, let me give you a tip. If you're using fresh herbs, gather them up on the branch, just like this, and put them on a tray in the microwave and microwave them. And what will happen is they'll begin to dry out just enough that if you rub them between your palms, the herb leaves will fall off. And it's the easiest way of stripping the leaves from the stems. Then you can discard the stems. I'm going to take this mixture, and this is everything that you see there, and I'm going to put it into a spice grinder because I want it to be just a little bit finer. And that's what you can expect to see when you get herbs de Provence. A fairly fine blend of herbs. Take good care of it. You don't want it to lose its aroma too quickly. So how do they use it? Well, one of the most popular things to put it on is lamb. And I've got some lamb right here. Here in the United States, we grow lamb pretty large. And why? Because we want a lamb chop that has a really big eye. So when the chops have an eye about this big, the leg of lamb is 12 or 13 pounds. If you travel to Provence, they like a more tender, small lamb. And so you can expect the eye of the chop to be about half this size, and the legs likewise would only be about 6 or 7 pounds. Right here, I have some loin chops. So this is the rib chops right here. And these are loin chops, which come from a little further down the back. If this were on a cow, what you would be looking at here is a T-bone steak. So on one side, a little piece of filet. On the other, on a beef cow, this would be the New York strip. In both cases, the bone is still in here, and I think that's a great way to cook lamb. I'm not going to cook these loin chops right now. Instead, I'm going to cook the rib chops, or the lamb chops, and I'm going to season them with salt and a little bit of pepper, but mostly I'm going to season them with herbs de Provence. And we'll flip them over and do the same on the second side. This meat could sit for 20 or 30 minutes with the herbs de Provence on the outside. That would be just about right. And I usually press them on there so that they stick pretty well. And then we'll drizzle on some olive oil and turn them in the oil. And just let those herbs work their magic. So I've got a hot surface, a hot grill to cook my lamb chops, and I want to make sure there's some oil on there. And as soon as these herbs get hot, they're going to perfume this meat in the most delicious way. This, to me, is quintessential Provence. Okay, these lamb chops are done. I put them up on their end like this so that the fat can brown, but also so that they can rest a little bit without being exposed to the heat too much. If you take a look in this pot, you can see that our artichokes baragoule have cooked, and this is where you want to test them, right through the thick part of the heart, and you can see how the knife goes in easily, but comes out just as easily. So when I serve these, I'm going to drain off some of the excess liquid. The liquid that these cook in is absolutely delicious and should not be thrown away. You know, you can use it to create another batch of artichokes if you like, Or later on, I'll show you a great trick for making a delicious salad with those artichokes. And I'm going to drizzle those with just a little bit of olive oil. And keep them moist with a spoon or two of the braising liquid over the top. And then we're going to bring these lamb chops over. And while they're still hot, I'm going to sprinkle on just a little bit more of the fresh herbs de Provence so that it's aromatic. And a quick drizzle of lemon juice just to break. So we've got just enough time for a quick dessert. Around the Mediterranean, fruit is oftentimes consumed as dessert. Certainly there's some great pastry traditions here and there, but here in Provence, I'm going to offer up a fruit dessert. I love figs this time of the year, and we're towards the end of the summer. Early in the summer, we get figs, but they're not quite as ripe as these. These have seen more sun, and they get very soft. So what I want to do is bake these figs and some other fruit under a little cap of creme fraiche. Not sour cream, but richer than sour cream. This is a cultured cream product. So let's get started. First, so that nothing sticks, I'm going to put a little butter in the bottom of this oven-proof dish. And I'm going to take these figs and cut them top to bottom almost all the way through, and then squeeze them almost like a baked potato and open them up like that. They look like little blossoms almost. And then I've got some apricots. And I'm going to cut those into wedges. And we'll sprinkle these in here as well. And then just a few blueberries sprinkled around. And next I'm going to take creme fraiche and just smooth it out. It's a little bit thick when it's cold, but certainly later on when we run this under the broiler, it will thin out. I want to just drizzle on some creme fraiche. And as you add it, keep in mind how many portions you're making. So I think that's probably enough. And while the fruit is nice and sweet, I want to make this look a little bit better by sprinkling on some brown sugar. Now, I'm going to take this and I'm going to run it under the broiler. And the creme fraiche will begin to melt, the sugar will begin to brown, the fruit will soften. And when it's ready, we'll bring it back and serve it. Okay, I'm back from the broiler. There you can see that fruit and the cream just beginning to brown just a little bit. A sprig or two of mint, and that's ready to go. This whole meal, this Provençal meal, from the artichokes with herbs de Provence to the tian to the fruit, is somehow familiar. This idea of eating lamb chops seems familiar to us, but I'm here to tell you the aromas coming off of this food are distinctively Provençal.